Something inside of you is freezing you solid, making you unable to come up with new ideas. It's time to let it go. So, little tidbit about me. Right after I posted last week's video, I started planning for this one. And you can see for yourself how that went.
No, maybe
it's
we can try doing it like...
You have to do it better!
All of that happened while I just lay in bed. I kept writing ideas down, but none of them seemed to stick. They were all just bad ideas, or ideas that I didn't feel good enough to execute. This is a pretty familiar situation for me. I was just sitting and staring at my blank document until I realized what was actually happening, and that it was something I had defeated before. People all over the world face it, and it's called writer's block, and I could say that Wikipedia could not have picked a better picture for this situation. Thank you, Wikipedia. This perfectly describes how I look right now. And this kind of creative block doesn't apply to just writers, it happens to anyone who wants to create any sort of anything. We have painters with creative blocks, we have musicians with creative blocks, we have Minecraft players with literal creative blocks that end up burying themselves in holes instead. So this thing, whatever it is a tyrant that's been ruling over us since forever. The monster comes from within. Its name is perfection. Perfection is a bit of a paradox. Yes, on its own, perfection is an ideal. It's like an angel, this thing that everyone aspires to meet and to touch. But perfection is ruthless. It looks down on anything that doesn't meet its standards, and it scorns even the unborn works just waiting to come out of your head. I knew perfection for a long time. For me, it manifested particularly when it came to writing. Even before I was into writing books and stories, it attacked me while I was in school. You see, when I mentioned that I was a legendary cram master in middle school, by the way, you can check that video up over here, and most of it wasn't because I couldn't get started. That was 95%. But the other part was being under perfection's draconian rule. I actually hated it more when we had to write a paper and the teachers let us choose the topics. Because that only meant I would be staring at the ceiling as perfection scowled at me, waiting to cough up that one perfect idea that I could use to get an 8. But no idea would ever be enough. It didn't matter how good it sounded. Perfection would just say it sucked without even looking at it.
No! Absolutely not! No!
The same thing happened when I wanted to write a novel. I was trying. I beat procrastination with my magic spell. That got my butt off my bed and into my chair, but now I was here, sitting in front of my computer, clawing at my skull while the gears inside my head kept turning. This would go on hour after hour, but at the end of it, the page would still be blank. My mind just wasn't working. I was frozen solid, unable to work. And now, when you've done well on something, when you've been making videos for a few weeks and have lots of people telling you you're doing a really good job, that perfection comes to remind you that it's there. I had such a hard time making this video, and I asked my friends way too many times like, hey, what video do you guys want to see? And it didn't matter. I thought every idea on the table just sucked, and whatever skills I had to make the last videos, that just kind of ran out. I felt like a wizard out of mana, or a knight who lost the power to pull Excalibur out of the rock. But the moment of truth came in while my mental council started deliberating again.
Oi, come on,
No,
we really just gotta
it's
get
just
something
too
down.
bad. We have to do better.
Why? Why is it bad? It just is. I mean, look at it.
I mean, okay, can you tell me what specifically is bad about
I
it?
can't judge this. Look, it's just an idea. There isn't...
Oh!
My inability to come up with a logical reason why my idea sucked was the red flag that changed the tide of the battle. Because when you think something's bad, you're hating on it. But what's ridiculous about creative blocks is that you're hating on something that doesn't even exist.
Thing! I hate you, you know that? I wish you were real, so I could hate you even more!
So why not bring this thing into existence? Go ahead and take this thing, make it real so you can go ahead and bash it all you want. And a terrible draft or study is kind of like a big block of raw material. It's not good right away, but with enough strikes you can probably chisel it into something really cool. The part of your brain that criticizes and tears things apart will be in charge of chiseling it, but in order to actually get that initial block of clay, you need to let your creativity flow. That thing only flows when you shut that critic up for a while so you can actually get to work. It's no surprise that the advice given to writers who have writer's block is to give yourself permission to write poorly. And I mean to really give yourself permission, because some folks like me are still gonna keep hating on their own work even when nobody else in the world is gonna see it. I did that while writing, I did that while planning this video, and even though perfection was screaming in my head the entire time, I did everything in my power to ignore it and keep working anyway.
La 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 la, I'm not listening to you. La 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 la, I'm trying to write. Don't bother me, I'm not listening to you.
And you see, the big plot twist is that whatever you make won't be anywhere nearly as trashy as you'd expect. If you've already created something nice before, then that means you already do have the skills you need to make something nice. And I gotta assume that's the case, because if you're totally new to this and it's your first time, then you probably are gonna create trash, and this video over here explains why that's fine. You haven't lost your skills, at least not permanently. You've lost them in the moment because you're overthinking it. You know how athletes choke when they're about to win an important game? I actually have a really good video about that, and you can click it over here. Creative blocks, writer's block, this is the artist's version of choking under pressure. For me, I find this happens way more often after I make something I'm proud of. Cause you know, I always want to be outdoing myself and making each video better than the last, so the pressure kind of comes from myself? Yeah, sometimes I'm not very smart. And if you're a student that still hasn't decided what topic to base your paper on, that pressure gets bigger every minute until the deadline. The thing that's holding us back in those situations is the fear of getting it wrong, which is pretty counterproductive, especially for things like writing and video making, because we really need to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. And no kidding, when I gotta write a paper or something, I'd rather have like 10 pages of garbage than none. Because then I can put my judger glasses on. Because then I can go and put my judger glasses on and go, okay, we need a source for that. No, why would you explain it that way? No, let's do it this way instead. And that's kind of how you end up with a finished paper. Since experimentation is such a core part of the process, we really need to internalize that whatever we do with a blank page might not end up being the final product. Because the truth is, perfection is a scared little whiner that doesn't want to look stupid in front of everyone else. The thing is, it still screams when no one is around but you. To get over yourself, you really just gotta let it go. Unleash your creative potential and ignore whatever it says, even though it may seem to be right in the moment. Tell perfection that you're going to look over it again later, but for now, you're going to create this so-called trash, and you're not gonna be disturbed until you do. This is why strict time limits like brainstorm 10 ideas in 2 minutes or write a draft in 1 hour help, because this time frame forces you to plow through perfection screaming just so you can get it done. And for me, this works pretty well. I actually like using this website called Write or Die that plays annoying sounds if you stop typing for too long. Bottom line, take the pressure off of yourself. Go and shove an icicle into perfection's face, and tell it that it can wait until later, even if its screams are freezing you solid. The cold never bothered you anyway.